Joining me now on Yahoo Finance Presents is Ray Dalio. Ray, good to see you again and welcome back to Yahoo Finance. Really appreciate you taking some time. I stumbled upon on YouTube principles for dealing with the changing world order, why nations succeed and fail. This posting by you has amassed close to 10 million views.
Eventually, out of these conflicts, whether they're violent or not, come new winners who get together and restructure the losers' debts and political systems and establish the new world order. Then the old cycle and empire ends and the new one begins, and they do it all over again. That's a lot of detail I just threw at you to paint a picture of how the typical big cycle transpires. Of course, not all of them transpire in exactly this way, but most largely do.
Take us through how you came up with it and why'd you put this together?
Well, the study, I needed to understand things that were happening to us. I'm a global macro investor, and there are things that are happening in our lifetimes that never happened before. The amount of spending financed by debt, the amount of internal conflict, the rise of great power in the form of China to challenge the existing world order, and so on, the alliances with Russia and all of that. And so I needed to study the rise and decline of reserve currency. So I went back 500 years to see the Dutch guilder and the patterns of the past. It helps me. And then when I did the study, I did a book because I thought it was important to pass along. And then I wanted to make it very clear and digestible. So the animation that you're talking about is very clear and digestible so people can put what's now happening in the perspective of these historical patterns, which helps people think about what's coming next.
I will bring this more current momentarily, but I do want to ask, how does this type of exercise or this type of research by you help you become a better investor?
Well, it helps me understand what's likely to come next. Mm-hmm. You know, like, for example, right now, the U.S. is imposing sanctions. Sanctions it's a form of economic warfare, and it has a big implication for the dollar, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, now others are trying to get out of the dollar system. There's a dollar system that now is being changed. India is dealing directly with Russia, and holders of dollar-denominated assets don't want to hold those dollar assets if they feel that they're going to be grabbed and so on. So what's happening now has happened many times before. And without that kind of perspective, I wouldn't be able to deal with it. And I learned this in my past because, well, just quickly, in 1971, I was clerking on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. And President Nixon gets on and he says, we're not going to give you the gold that the dollar is backed by. And we had a devaluation. It took me by surprise. I walked on the floor of the stock exchange. I thought it was going to go down a lot. It went up a lot. And that's because I never experienced the currency devaluation. I found the same exact thing when I studied history, same exact announcement took place on March 5th, 1933 by Roosevelt and had the same effect. So I understood then how history before me was important. Studying the Great Depression allowed me and Bridgewater to anticipate the 2008 financial crisis. If I didn't study that, what's happening now is very relevant, is a guide to the past, is a guide to what's happening now.
Let's talk about what is happening now. Is globalization, and just using this in the context of what you have written here, is globalization at a point of failure, or has it failed?
As we are approaching a challenging of the world order, in other words, a great power challenging another, there is an increased likelihood of some kind of war. There are 5 kinds of wars. There's a trade war, a technology war, a geopolitical influence war, a capital war, which we're in the midst of, and then there's a military war. And those things drive countries to be self-sufficient and independent. And as a result, globalization diminishes and nationalism increases. Yes.
What does that mean for financial markets? Because by and large, I think a lot of folks would be surprised that stocks are hanging tough, all things considered.
Well, it's not the stock market. Stock market. So it's in the book. It takes you through the stock markets during war periods, and so the only thing that matters for stocks is the cash flows. And as you get into the conflict, that's a different story. If you begin to see as it progresses, those that are affected by the individual events have an effect. For example, tech stocks. But anyway, in answer to your question, how does it affect the markets? It affects the value of money most fundamentally. Like what we're seeing now is that the value of money, when you run very large deficits, and you have to spend a lot. You have to spend a lot on social programs. You have to spend a lot on defense. You have to spend a lot on environmental programs and so on. And so when you spend a lot more money than you earn, then you have to print money to make up that difference, to make the purchases. And then that devalues money. And so it's like the examples I gave you of the two currency devaluations that you had before. 1971 led to the inflationary period of the 1970s. And so you have the stock market. Yes, the stock market goes up and other things, but cash is trash. And people then begin to learn that the bonds that they're holding have negative returns. And it starts to change the value of money. The value of money, the value of dollars and so on. So money goes into other assets. It produces more of an inflation, and you start to enter a certain type of environment. And the environment that we're in is beginning to be very much like that of the 1970s.